pop-up from DFE and it's not come. So I was, oh, bear with me. Hang on a minute. Right. See. Oh, no. See you later. Okay.
There's no music with it, Julie.
Okay, a very warm welcome to all of you to the Dartmoor Sports Partnership. My name is Michelle Roberts and I'm the strategic lead of the Dartmoor Sports Partnership. It's great to have you all with us this morning. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have a face-to-face conference, but it's great that you were all able to come this morning. It was great also to see those slides of all the achievements in past years and also in what has been a very challenging year. And I loved the superheroes. I thought that was a great photo. I think that sums up all of our work over the last 12 months. I think you've all been superheroes as well as our children. So it was great to see that photo. And a big thank you to all of you really for all the work you've done over the last 12 months and to the SSCO team and the Dartmoor team and to our wider sports community. It has been a really tough year and we look forward, as we said at the end, to continuing to work with you throughout the summer term and hopefully to a more normal time coming up in September. I'm just going to do some housekeeping before I introduce our keynote speaker, just to say that this session is being recorded. So if you do want to view it later, you can do. Please could you put your mute button on so that we don't get any background sounds while we're proceeding. Obviously, you're welcome to keep your cameras on. We will have a chat box running throughout the keynote. So if you do want to ask questions, we will be keeping an eye on the chat box. There will be a chance to ask questions at the end of each of the keynote speakers. And we do have some questions that have been sent, I think, in advance. And then after the keynote speakers this morning, you will have hopefully been sent some links of pre-recorded workshops which you can access throughout this afternoon. And I know some of you are meeting your SSCOs later today. We will also send you a QR code which will have a feedback link, and we would welcome your feedback, please, on today's conference. That's really valuable to us. Okay, I have great pleasure now in welcoming Sue Wilkinson from AFP. Sue is the Chief Executive of AFP. This role involves leading AFP, which is the only subjects association for PE and school sport. And the role of AFP and Sue in particular is to support the workforce, its members, and to lobby. And I know she really does lobby on behalf of all of us to raise the profile of PE and to improve outcomes for children. Sue was trained in human movement studies and has taught in secondary schools. She was then working for the TDA, training primary colleagues and specialising in physical education. She's taken on an advisory role. She's also trained as an Ofsted inspector in primary PE. She's worked in Hong Kong as well on teacher training programmes. She's also worked with BALPI and the Youth Sports Trust and was instrumental in the Pascal strategy. She became the strategic lead for AFP in 2011, where she co-authored several publications and leads on the quality mark and the effective use of the PE premium and the trailblazing level 5 and level 6 qualifications. She received an MBE in 2017 for her services to education, and also in 2019 she received an honorary Doctor of Science from the University of Bedfordshire for her outstanding services to PE. So welcome, Sue. It's great to have you here this morning, and I'm now going to hand over to you.
Morning everybody, and thank you, Michelle, for inviting us. If you're still awake after all that, I'm sorry about that. I don't know where you got that from, Michelle. I'm just Sue, same as you, but not actually on the front line as you all are in schools. What I'd like to do today is also get you to feed into the chat. Because we're recorded, if you don't want everyone to see it, just send it to me privately. Because what we were trying to do is get an honest picture of the mood out there of the workforce and what they're having to manage, so we can feed back to various agencies. So I have got our own Professor Whitty, which is Simon Roach, and he's going to move my slides for me, if that's okay. So Simon, can we have the first slide, please? Michelle and the team have asked us to cover all of these areas. I've got a bit of kickback here. Sorry, I hope you can hear me. Now, what we want to do, because some of you I have seen before, I know Michelle's spoken to some of you in November and also this year as well, but we need to reflect back from the last lockdown. That's really important, and I'll show you why because of the research later on. And then we're going to go through each of those points, because what I want you to do from today is take away these slides and personalise them for your own use and to work with colleagues, because we've got a really important few months ahead. I was hoping to have an update on the primary P and Sport premium today. So if my eyes cast away, it's just looking at an email from the DFE. Now, what I would like you to do is, using one adjective only, just put into the chat box privately to me or to everybody, and tell me how you feel at this moment in whatever role you're playing, whether you're SGO, SSGO, school workforce, external provider, whatever your role is. Please just put it in and say, this is how I feel. And you can be as honest as you like, but no swear words, remember, because we are on record. So how are you feeling right now at this moment in time? Okay, I'm going to start because I'm tired, absolutely exhausted. Elise, thank you. Challenged, frantic. Anybody else? How do you feel? Delighted? Happy? Overworked? We know we're underpaid, so we'll take that. Optimistic, Matthew, thank you. That is really great to hear. Anxious, yeah, absolutely. Because we're not quite through this yet, are we? Now, what I do want you to think about is all the thousands of people or children that you have helped. Because we have been on an epic roller coaster that's like a graphic equalizer. We are so fortunate that through this pandemic, our membership has grown exponentially, be it a school or membership. It's almost doubled. But what we are getting from members is they get really fed up and downhearted and demotivated if they see something negative in the press. We've all been there. I had a really tough day a couple of weeks ago, and then on top of that, my husband texts me, can I call and get this? So I'm stood in a queue to go in a shop, and then it starts to rain, and you just think, yeah, end of a perfect day. And there were two young women in front of me, and it really lifted my spirits when I'll cut the expletives, but basically they'd got 4 children between them, a 3 and a 1. And they were saying they would never, ever, ever criticise a teacher. And by that, I mean the wider workforce as well, because they don't know how they can't cope at all. And you need to remember that. You might get the one odd comment, we might see a bit of negative press, but think of all the thousands that you've made a difference to. And that is really, really important. And what I want you to do now is look at this video and then put in the chat box one word, you can put in as many times as you like, of what you actually see in this video. Okay, Simon, this child is 18 months old. It hasn't been enhanced or harnessed. Tell me what you see. On this one, it's envy. I've never been able to get my leg that high up. Now that was perfectly safe. It's not quite as high up as you see, although you can see the roof in the sports hall there, but you've all got it. Fearless, determination, resilience, challenge. Now that child is 18 months old. If Margaret Whitehead from the Physical Literacy Association and my mentor when I was at Bedford saw that, she would say that child has had 1,000 hours of crawl time, of play time, and they are absolutely fearless. Now, if that's where they are when they arrive with you, even more developed at 4 or 5, where can we take them on that journey as we go through to statutory end of PE at 16? We have great challenges there, but we know they don't all arrive school ready, and that's really difficult for you. We know that. Now on the left is your normal education maze. You navigate that every single day. No, it's not a problem. You find the ways around it. Sometimes you have to crash through it, and that's fine. But during COVID, the one on the right happened. We were not ready for this. There was no blueprint, no advice, no guidance, no mentor, because nobody globally had faced what you faced in education. And I think when you look back, and often we only look back to see how far we've travelled, you have to remember how innovative, creative, intuitive, and how you reacted to this awful situation. And it's really important that you share that and you celebrate it, because that's something we are not good at as a profession. And I think what is really important is parents, senior leaders, other subjects really know what you have done and achieved. And we'll have a look at Sport England's research a bit later to show why this is so important. So throughout lockdown, you can see how PE, sport and physical activity has really come to the forefront, because we all know from research from Youth Sport Trust, from our own research, Sport England, UK Active, right across the sector, that the status of PE was in decline, primary through to secondary. And that's a real challenge. Now, what we've got to do is hold on to that to make sure it never happens again. And our task force was all about reinventing that status and celebrating what a brilliant workforce we've got. So, Simon, could you show us the next slide? Now, when we reflect, often, sorry, you've jumped one, Flower. Can we just go back? Oh, sorry, no, we haven't. Sorry. Can we just go? That's it. Right. Okay. So let's look at the context. When we look back, we know PE, particularly in secondary and in primary, is in decline, and that is really difficult because what's happening is there's a lot of funding out there. Is it being used effective? We don't quite know. But we have got key issues around inactivity, obesity, and emotional well-being. Now, let's be really honest when we look back. Were these just during COVID? And actually, no, they're not. What's happening is it's been brought to the forefront. So if we go back to pre-COVID, what were we doing that actually was not supporting increasing activity, looking after body weight management, actually getting messages across? We had a great opportunity and great opportunities to develop through PESPA. We've also had a great deal of funding put in there. Are we actually saying to our young people, like that baby, we are giving you appropriate and suitable challenges that are risk manageable? You know, we've got to get away from not giving children risk, because that's really important. And then what today is about is how we engage and challenge children to get them to the level when they arrive at school. And we know you only have them for 15% of their lifetime, but that has to be fed back to communities to ensure that they grow and learn. Okay, Simon, could I have the next slide, please? Now, all that creativity that you've come up with, we need to sustain, because we have still got children and young people who do not like PE, sport and physical activity. Why is that? There are great opportunities out there. We've got a fantastic active partner infrastructure. We have got all USGOs who are providing fantastic opportunities for competition. Where are the children that are not engaging with us, and what can we do to try and make children more comfortable with PE, sport and physical activity? Okay, Simon, please can we have the next slide? What we need to build on is transformational change. Now, these 4 areas, you'll know all about this, but this was the research carried out by Sheffield Hallam. And you can see it involved over 65,000 children and young people and 5,000 teachers. And I don't think any of us on this call would disagree that actually when children are actively involved and they are comfortable and safe and secure in their PE, sport and physical activity, well-being improves. We know that without doubt. Head teachers and parents are saying children and young people's well-being is the most important. So we just hang on to that because we have to take the rhetoric into reality. Behaviour improves, well documented. And if children are happy, they're confident. If they're confident, they achieve better. Now, all children will not be straight A students, we know that. But if they are happy, they achieve their full potential, whatever that may be. And then socially, we have greater involvement and engagement. Now, using that research, last year, at the start of the summer, we created this poster. Now, some of you may have seen this with Michelle. And what it is about reactivating learning. So Simon, can we have that one up, please? Now, there's two parts to this. It looks quite busy, but it was initially designed to look at the signs and symptoms of the impact of COVID on physical, emotional, social well-being. So if you look at the diamond in the middle, what the symptoms are saying around the physical is that, for example, core strength deteriorated. Children's fine and gross motor skills, when they come back, they couldn't hold a pen. They were cutting with the tongue open. They found out of breath quite quickly. Now, in terms of emotional well-being, you know your children better than anyone, but were they more anxious? Did you find them clingy? You know, what were those symptoms like? Were there greater anxiety? And then in terms of social well-being, how was the behaviour? Did they find it hard to share? Did children of key workers who were in school, were they more settled than those who'd been learning from home? And then in terms of cognitive development, again, was there a deterioration in behaviour? Children finding it hard to concentrate? So there's all those signs and symptoms. And then the outer part shows you some of the how. So we've got the why and the how there. So for example, what can you do in PE to improve that? Well, maybe you could have extra health-based type of activities. If you think of the Creating Active Schools framework, that is phenomenal and has a massive impact on whole school improvement. You know, it's something the active partnerships that started in Yorkshire Sport have had significant success with. And then in terms of the emotional well-being, what can you do to support those children? Can you give them more problem-solving activities? And socially, can you get them working with one peer, then a group, more task-based stuff where they can work together and support each other? They're not frightened to make a mistake, a culture of support. And then finally, in terms of cognitive development, can we work with senior leaders? Can we talk to them about how we can restructure the day? Can we have those mini breaks? Can we use other staff to take groups out and make some physical activity just to calm them down? We've seen that work in Sandal Castle and it's absolutely phenomenal, the difference it's made. Now, initially this was for the staff, and then one teacher actually got the children at Key Stage 2 to circle how they felt, and it was a real eye-opener. Then it started to go home and have traction because some of the parents and carers hadn't realised how anxious their children were. And then siblings start to look at it, and then we introduced it into secondary school. There is another poster then that looks at the what you can do, and you probably do that, but there might be some more ideas in there. So you can get those and just download them, and they will be with this presentation. So it is really important that we look how we support the children and young people, not just now in COVID, but carrying on forward, because those emotional well-being issues were there already. Okay, Simon. Now, carrying on with the research from Sheffield Hallam, it talked about how physical activity can reduce the stress. Now, we already know that, but often we need independent research to convince the community, to convince parents, and sometimes our senior leaders, because we know they place emotional well-being at the forefront. And yet, as you get back into school, I'm going to use the C word, catch up. I hate it, because by implication, they're saying a lot of children didn't learn anything or have lost learning. And I find that really challenging and quite an insult, because the workforce did a phenomenal job. Online learning, live learning, recorded learning non-stop, 12 hours a day and more. Parents engaged more. And then we also had the children and young people. But we couldn't help it, no fault, no blame. They were sat in front of a screen for long periods of time. The recorded lessons we know helped because parents could engage at different times and help their children, but their well-being did grow to a greater stress level. Now we know that, and young people are not actually recognising it was due to inactivity. So it's really important, you've all got it, that we actually talk to them about it. You need to be more active. Okay, can we have the next slide, please, Simon? Now, this might help you. It'd be a great poster to see in schools. It would be great to send home to parents, to give out in the community, because it talks about how we can engage them all, because we know some children are not engaged, but they need to be empowered. And also we need to empower them to talk to their parents. So we need that pupil voice in order to ensure that our curriculum is inclusive. Now you'll see there's some tweaks to the new inspection framework handbook. Do have a look, although I've got some of the summaries for them, but we still need that ambitious curriculum. So can we look at an active day, but it has to be relative. There's nothing worse than just going and watching a lesson and then see children and say, stop, we're going to jig about. Not relevant. Not relevant. It needs to be relevant to the learning. So one of the best lessons I saw was around an English lesson, and it was about nouns, collective nouns, where the children went round collecting things, and it was pre-COVID, but they were hugging and they do various physical activities. Now those children who learn kinesthetically had their learning in those collective nouns reinforced through a practical experience. There's some fantastic opportunities about there to reinforce learning in maths. And then another area I've seen is where orienteering is used to reinforce areas of geography and mathematics. How wonderful to actually look at plans, walking around the school and then going outside and doing some OAA that will reinforce those learners, because not everyone is a visual or auditory learner. Many are kinesthetic, as most teachers of PE are. So it's important we get that pupil voice, we are inclusive, we ensure they're active, and that we actually have that ambitious curriculum. Great slide to send home, and it was created by Sport England and their research. Okay, so what did Ofsted say? Well, the next slide shows you the summary as a result of the visits in November, December, January. And I have to say, not one person complained about them because they were real discussions about the challenges. But what was great to see was Amanda Spielman's comment in October about how important practical subjects were, and not just focusing on what are traditionally seen as the core in English, maths and science. You know, it's really important. And those collaborative conversations focused on what the schools had done. So it was a real celebration, wasn't much notice. Often it was done online, and it created the following evidence base. Okay, Simon, can I have the next slide, please? Now, this shows the summary. So you can use this in whatever context you like. And I've put the secondary one up because they really suffered in terms of the practical elements, the music, the drama, design technology, and of course PE. Now, if you think of the knock-on effect for those students who were doing GCSE and A-levels, but also your students going forward. And this is about transition. It's really important that when your year sixes transition to year 7, that the schools understand where they're coming from. Because if they continue with a loss of PE in secondary, we're going to be paying for this for a long time. Now, the mental and physical stamina, those are Ofsted's words, but we know them as emotional well-being, and that's a fact. Concentration, you know, all sorts of aspects, anxiety, behaviour. You may have noticed it, you may not. You may have strategies for managing that, you may not need it. But there was a clear picture right across the research that Ofsted did that emotional well-being has suffered. And then children can't socially interact anymore, they felt. Now, you know, that's not rocket science, it's obvious. If they haven't got siblings at home, or they haven't got siblings of a similar age, they haven't been able to see anyone, how do we re-socialise and re-engage? And the reactivation poster has been really helpful in schools to get children to socially integrate. That is key. Indoor and outdoor lessons now, absolutely great. Going to fixtures, all sorts of things that they used to do with their peers. And what about the playground? You know, are there opportunities for them to sit or stand and talk, or to be physically active and talk? Are there problem-solving things they can do out on that playground at break times, lunch times, and after school? And then the weight gain. Now, this is a big issue for me. Teachers have so many other roles to play, but the key one is to inspire learning and to teach. It's very difficult to be the psychiatrist, the medical practitioner, the NICT nurse, and all the other things you have to deal with. But it is really important that there's an engagement with parents and carers and the community, because that weight management is important. But you can't solve that problem. You can only be part of that solution. Okay, next slide, please, Simon. Now, the reason why I put this up is we're still in a temporary world. 86 local authorities, as you know, have now got a new variant. So we still have to proceed with caution, but we do need that legacy in place. Now, we need the re-engagement principles. How do you talk to the head teachers? Have you got a slot in the staff meeting? Have you got a slot at the governor's meeting? Can you review and really look, is your curriculum broad and balanced, or has it shrunk for COVID? Because if it shrunk for COVID, we don't want to stick with that. We need the broadest, most ambitious curriculum. You are so creative, and I know it's not necessarily you, but it's convincing others that this is not about sitting down, do literacy and numeracy, because we know in order for children to gain any momentum in terms of their cognitive development, the physical, emotional and social well-being are absolutely key. So let's look at the 5 key indicators. Now, whilst they're aimed at the primary P and Sport premium, we need you to talk to your secondaries about these, because they transition right across. You know, what are you going to take to your secondary schools and have a discussion with them about? How can your SCOs and SGAs help with that transition? How can you give evidence that your children are active, and how are you going to get the secondaries to sustain and improve that? Professional development, we know, is key. We don't know what's going to happen. We're all hopeful, fingers crossed, that government realise now more than ever that money is needed. But it's not going to be there forever. It will come in different guises. But we need a sustainable workforce, because you are the bedrock. And without that workforce, it's not going to happen. And within that transition, you know, you need to explain, articulate and evidence how far your children have come. Because up until COVID, we were finding that primary PE was actually really getting to a high quality, but children were dropping off in year 7s and 8s, and we can't afford that to happen. And then last but not least, you do have to still manage the bubbles. We know you can have fixtures, but it also says in the next paragraph that you have to manage those social bubbles. So just think very carefully. If you're a member, go on the member site and look at how to manage fixtures and meetings and everything you do after school, because that is important to keep everybody safe. And, you know, we've seen some great practice. We've seen head teachers say, right, we're going to teach in a secondary school in class only. But the challenges that presents for PE, when you've got 15 girls and 15 or 16 boys, they do not want to do PE together at 11, 12, 13. So they have challenges there, as you have challenges as well, keeping the playground zoned off and so on. Now, you can open that more, you can do indoors, but keep the ventilation going when you're indoors and just keep monitoring as best you can. Okay, Simon, can I have the next slide, please? Now, this is key. And why I had a bad day is someone quite senior said to me in another organisation, why are you so tied up with semantics about PE, sport, physical activity? It's the same thing. And you know, when the red mist comes down, and I wanted to get on my broomstick, but I had to take a big deep breath and say, you have to understand this is a jigsaw. This isn't about one being more important than the other. This is about a picture. Take away any piece of that jigsaw and children and young people will suffer. So we have PE, a statutory entitlement, learning to move, moving to learn. We do not have the sport curriculum. Now, if you think about why we've got the challenges, is it because we veered towards sports? Or is it those schools that are highly successful, that they've seen a positive trajectory in their SATs? Is it because they have put PE front and centre? Then we've got school sport. It's the enrichment activities. And if your PE is good, children will transition into school sport. However, we have to recognise some of the activities offered are not for some children. So have we got Pilates after school, a primary version? Have we got sort of primary sort of games for understanding? Have we got dance? I actually don't mind if it's pole dancing, if it's getting them active and it's something they enjoy and it's appropriate. What sort of activities are we getting those who are inactive or not turning up to the clubs? And sometimes when we get quality mark applications, we see we have all these children going to 100% of the clubs. And when you actually interrogate the data, they are the same 15% going to 100% of the clubs. We would prefer to see 100% of the children going to 1 or 2 clubs, because then we've really engaged, we are really inclusive and we're really diverse. So what's on offer there? Go back to that poster. Have we really engaged our young people? You know, other new things we've got to do. You've got your premium, you've got an underspend. Other activities we can introduce. Saw petanque in a school. Absolutely great. Children loved it. Children who do not like the physicality of a invasion game. Well, that's fine. You can turn it into something more active. Just target games. You know, it's really important that our club offer in school sport is good. Then physical activity. That almost is the overarching aspect. And we interviewed some children in a school that features on TV the other week. And it was interesting talking to them about their parents didn't like physical activity. Now, you know how children can influence parents, whether it's a toy, whether it's time on the Xbox or whatever. But we do know from the research that children were a great influence in getting parents to stop smoking, for example. So we need to get children to celebrate their parent activity. Now, we've all got these Fitbits. Where on your Fitbits, certainly not on mine, does it talk about vacuuming, digging the garden out, cartering the windows? It doesn't. And it's really interesting to know that children don't always see that as activity. It's not just about playing sport. We need to educate our children and get them to praise mum and dad, carer, grandparents when they're out digging the garden. They are physically active, but it may not be in a formal P or sport sense. So once we get that celebration, they might actually go into other things. They might not want to run, but they might go walking. They might get the children planting vegetables, digging in the garden, helping with the mopping. You know, it's quite funny, really. I'm 5'1", and my husband gets really annoyed because when we go out for a walk, I've probably done about 3,000 steps more than him because my little legs are going twice as fast. So it's a big comic because he starts to do little shuffling steps. And he was in the garden, and I brought in the cartering because I was doing the windows, and then I was mopping the mess I'd left afterwards. And it's amazing how the active minutes go up, but there was nothing I could record it. So anybody who's a genius at Fitbits, get those household chores on there as well, because it's a real celebration and understanding being physically active is not just about a particular aspect of sport. Okay, Simon, thank you. So how do we use these funding streams that you've all got? You've still got your primary Pin Sport Premium. As you know, it's confirmed you can carry over that one you should have reported in March, but at this moment in time, you've still got to report by July. Now, this isn't anybody being difficult, but it is very hard to carry over treasury spend. I'm sure Jo will confirm that when she speaks to you later. It's absolutely vital to make sure that you've got everything in place. Okay, thanks. I know my microphone's tapping my necklace, so I can't take it off at the minute, so I'm sorry about that. The Sport England Teacher Training Programme. Now, although it's secondary, can you talk to your secondary TSAs about working together so you can look at transition? Can you develop something so they can see where your children are when you actually look at their progress? What can they do when they have your year sixes come in? And then last but not least, your catch up. 6,000 for a primary. Does that all have to go on core areas? Surely the physical, emotional, social, cognitive well-being is critical, and you have a role to play in that. And then secondaries have 22,000. Can you tap into that for your year sixes? You know, out there's been lots of stuff. The Sport Trust have done a workshop for you. There's all sorts of areas you can look at to access that funding. And then, of course, there is all the summer activities that are going on through HAF. So there are lots of opportunities here. Now, one of the things we've talked to the active partnerships about is sometimes it's not just accessing. Children may not have the right kit to go to summer clubs. So is there any money there or any way you can support children who don't have the right trainers? And it was something Jason Robinson said to me, what stopped him going to clubs was not that anyone could take him. He said, I'd have walked 10 miles. It's just to try and play rugby or football in your shoes is a real challenge. So do think about those things as well, particularly if you're working in a socio-economically deprived area. Okay, can I have the next slide, please, Simon? Okay, so how can we go forward? What can we do about this? Well, you're really, really lucky that you've got a fantastic infrastructure down there. You've got a really, really good workforce that can support. So when your children come in at reception, do you screen for motor impairment? Simple screening, getting them to see where they are. You saw that 5-year-old, okay, so 18 months old. Where are they when they're 5? Can they climb like that? Can they run, jump, skip? Are you looking at your early years physical development? And then do you screen them again when they go into Key Stage 2? What difference has been made? Then, have you got a whole school approach? If I came in to do a deep dive, would I see the same messages from governors, senior leaders, subject leader, classroom teachers, TAs, parents, children? Do they all value PE, sport and physical activity in the same way? Do they talk the same language? Because that's absolutely key. Is it a whole school approach? Is it front and centre? Do the values support the emotional well-being? If so, we should see PE at the heart, not marginalised or stopped when it's SATs or when it's school plays. It should always be there as a priority. And then one of the things they do look at is that logical sequence progressive. Is it scaffolded? Can you actually see? Now, that doesn't mean you just carry on regardless, because sometimes you have to go back and visit a lower part of the scaffold if that mastery of learning has not been achieved. And then, of course, is it inclusive? All questions you can be asking yourself, your colleagues, subject leaders, head teacher. And then the number one is ambition. If you do get an inspection, talk about that word. This is where we are, and this is the journey we've travelled. And as a result, we have become ambitious about increasing physical activity, ensuring PE is at the heart, and in making our enrichment activities far wider and inclusive. And that understanding is key, because then you can use additional staff, whether they're external staff, whether they're staff within the school, but you can use them to actually make a difference to the young people. Okay, Simon, could I have the next slide, please? That is a good aid memoir, but there isn't something you can lift off the shelf, and that is absolutely key. Your key statutory requirement is to deliver the national curriculum. Okay, taking something off the shelf, yes, but you have to make it bespoke, because children where you are may have different challenges to those in Birmingham, to those in Newcastle, to those in Norfolk. And often we see a lot of case studies, and they are critical and important, but you cannot replicate them because the school facilities, resources, staff knowledge and understanding may be different. The children's challenges may be different. The SEND may be different. The hidden disabilities may be different, but you can use the principles. So it needs to be bespoke, but what it does give you is a license to trailblaze, to bring that creativity in and that ideas you've come up with. And you will not get penalised for saying, do you know what? We tried this and it didn't work. And as a result, this is the learning, because that is absolutely key. Okay, Simon, could I have the next slide? So going forward, what can you do? Okay, what are the potential actions? Get a map of your physical education. Let's really look at this. Let's look at how much we do. And it is quite interesting to hear, we've had a couple of emails about what are you going to do about the national curriculum to make sure that children are physically active? The amount of people who do not focus on those 4 key outcomes, and the 4th bullet point, the 4th aim of the national curriculum for PE is to lead healthy, active lifestyles. It's there. You have that license to do that. And often people do not look at the purpose of PE. It's a good idea to cut and paste the purpose of PE, put it on a whiteboard, and then ask your colleagues to actually highlight the 10 most important words. And you've got things like sustained, physical activity, competition, challenge. You know, you've got all of these things in there which are absolutely key. And if you look at the happy outcomes posters, we've taken those words and put them on there and shown the difference it makes to children. So when they leave you at the end of year 6, all of those outcomes are what are needed for them to be good children going forward. You know, good British citizens. It hits the spiritual, moral, social and cultural. And then if you look at the CBI, 10 most important employability skills, it is about decision making, leadership, learning to sort of win with grace and lose with dignity. All of those things emanate through PE. What a contribution you can make to children and young people going forward. But the children have to own this. They have to say, I really like this PE, or I don't like this, but I do it because. I mean, at my height, at 5'1", I hated cross country. I hated any kind of distance running. I just wasn't physically made for it. But I did it because I believed in my teachers. They wanted me to be cardiovascularly as fit as I could. So when I was tumbling in gymnastics in a competition, I wasn't out of breath. When I was on that trampoline, I wasn't huffing and puffing, which threw my balance and wouldn't allow me to somersault properly or land something. So having that ownership, you need to do this. Those children who do not like to swim, this is a life skill. You need this, and sometimes you may need it to help others. So it's really important they know and understand why you're doing it. And actually, often you might need to talk to your colleagues, invest in professional learning. Think of all those colleagues who do a brilliant job on that social and emotional. Have they done the level 4? Have they understood the contribution of PE to it? And then one of the best people to do this, it doesn't just have to be the subject leader. You are there to upskill those colleagues so you have a sustainable workforce. But more importantly, it is to raise the profile of PE so it's seen as important. So is sport, so is physical activity, because if we get those steps right, people will go from PE into the enrichment, be more physically active, and then join community clubs, whether that's a walking club, Couch to 5K, whether it's the gym or whether it's an actual NGB type club. As long as they're active and enjoying it, that's the most important. Okay, Simon, please can I have the next slide? So this is your sort of part 2 of what you can do, your aid memoir, and that advocacy is key because already we're starting to see people slip. Not through any malicious intent other than the pressure for head teachers to ensure that they meet the targets that are being set to them externally. You know, wouldn't it be lovely if PE was part of a league table? That is an ask that we want, that it's measured, not well-being, and I'll share why. Because you could have a child, as Jason Robinson explains, goes into school, he has a fantastic day, his spirits are lifted. If you were Ofsted that day and that child was interviewed, they would be 10 out of 10 for well-being, socially adjusted, confident, happy. He then went home and witnessed awful domestic abuse, television going through the window, drugs, and he just about dragged himself into school in the same clothes, hungry. If that child was interviewed that day, his well-being would have been in his boots on a minor scale. And we can't allow teachers to be held accountable for that because you're not. What you can provide is a safe and secure environment that allows children to learn. That's what needs to be measured. And that through good physical education, good enrichment opportunities, and active school, active travel, you are offering a solution to them being physically competent. That's what needs to be measured in a league table, because we can't control often what happens in the community. And that message needs to go across to your governors. Have you got a governor for PE, sport and physical activity and emotional well-being? Have you got someone, a governor, who will come around and see what really is good practice? And that's important for when they're interviewed, because we need that consistent language. Do you have a children and young people council? Do they talk to you about what is good, bad and indifferent in PE? It's really interesting. I watched a lesson the other day. You know, we said to the children, what do you think is really bored? Why are you bored? Because I can do this, but Sammy can't do it. So, you know, what could we have done to that child to stop them being bored? Because that's when they're disengaged. So it's really important that we look at how the children are learning and the progress they are making, because what is for sure, the gap has widened during lockdown. Now that isn't a lost learning, that is different opportunities. That children have not been as physically active. So that transformational change needs to come about. And one of the tools, and I'm sure Joe can reference it later, is the CAF framework, because it's about whole school improvement. It puts all 3, PE, sport and physical activity, firmly into whole school improvement. And
Because if we keep doing the same things, we're going to get the same answers. And we know pre-COVID, we had issues about weight management, further issues around extensive obesity, issues around inactivity, and real challenges around emotional well-being. You know, we work with Generator and looking at eating disorders, and that has grown through lockdown. And you will be the people who notice those because you see children in that physical domain. Are they tired? Are they looking thin? Are they wearing lots of layers of clothes and baggy? How do you deal with that? Because that is all part of you recognising emotional well-being in your children, and you will pick it up more than anybody because you see them in that physical context. So let's allow our children and young people to catch up on the really important things: their physical well-being, their emotional, their social integration. And that needs to continue to be looked at, because if we don't, we lose that resilience, because resilience is built through those relationships, as the psychiatrist has said. But one of the things I want to say is your resilience. As I said earlier, you are the bedrock of the educational system, and Sydney Hook says children don't remember systems or processes or tests. They remember the teacher who has inspired them as a child. But if your emotional well-being is suffering and you are overworked and you are tired, then you're not going to be able to do your job. And it's really important that you look after yourself and you actually say, no, I'm having a rest tonight. Nobody's going to challenge you that, and nobody should either. And I know Simon's probably sitting there and saying, listen to her, you need to practice what you preach, but you have to say, I'm going to have a night off and do something different, whether that's for you, going out and playing sport, or going to the gym, or sitting and watching a movie. It doesn't matter, as long as you disengage from your job at some point, because you have to be role models for young people as well. And this is why. Can you put up the next slide, Simon? Because people have only just sort of realised what you do as a workforce. And again, teachers, I'm using that as broadest concept. Those people who work with children and young people, they see that top, don't they? But they do not realise what goes on underneath. Hopefully, COVID has changed that, and they will see that. They will see the difference that you've made. But in order for you to be that rock, that iceberg, and keep that underneath going, you know, somebody alluded to the fact it's a bit like a swan pedaling for England, paddling even for England. It is true, but in order for you to keep that upper part of it absolutely rock solid, you've got to be well too. And what I want to show you now is the other end of the spectrum, and I really believe in cradle to grave. I really, really do. I want you to just have a look at this 91, and I'm not kidding, she's a 91-year-old woman, and I want you to listen and look at what she does. 91. Okay, thank you, Simon. Okay, so if we're talking about cradle to grave, if we get those children that come in at 5 being able to do what that 18-month-old did, and then we look the journey that that person has gone on, look at the core strengths still there at that age, the mobility, the flexibility, that is pretty incredible. I know children in secondary school who couldn't do that handstand, that forward roll, that backward roll with the pike, that also couldn't do a cartwheel. It's really important that we embed how important it is to be physically educated. There's another clip, I think some of you may have seen it, and it's called Adults Fail. Now, if you look at it, there are people across the age range there who cannot throw, who cannot cast a fishing net, can't hold a core balance to jump or dive into a swimming pool. And there is one in particular where it's two women, one throws the car keys at her and she ducks and they go down the drain. You know, we all know people like that, and that is that lack of physically educated. And for me, I thought I knew quite a lot about PE and sport. And when I fell and broke my neck and I was paralysed, all sorts of things go through your mind. You know what a stubborn old mule I am. And I thought, I can't have this. I have got to be able to walk again. And following the op, they said, yeah, it's partially successful. You will be able to walk, although not very far. And I said, why is that? And they said, well, because you've broken C4, 5, 6. Anyway, I had a wonderful set of physios, and I was strapped to like a lectern, and you have to throw a balloon. Now, being quite competitive, I then moved on to a football and nearly knocked someone's head off. And the physio came over to me and she said, do you mind if I touch your core? And somewhere, I think I've mentioned this before, underneath that menopausal flab was a strong core. And all sorts of people are then poking and prodding you, and they put me on an intense physical activity that the Invictus guys use. And I walked out of there against all the odds, along with a young man who had been a footballer and was run over walking the dog from behind, and another guy who had an abscess on his spine and the operation went wrong, and he was a runner. And they said, this is too coincidental. And they kept looking at us 3 years down the line to see our development, but how that core was really important. And then I was put on an intensive physio one-to-one personal trainer, which I absolutely hated. I refused, once I finished as a gymnast, to ever do another sit-up again and have a medicine ball on my stomach. That was one part I hated. But it's amazing how you get back and that muscle memory. So trying to explain that to a 5, 7, 11, 13-year-old is really difficult. But if you're rolling these videos in school, if you are physically active, you could potentially be as active at 91. Do you want or know someone who is actually not able to catch the keys, can't hold the shopping and open the front door, bends down and split the trousers, can't nail without hitting the finger with the hammer? So they're all interconnected. So could I have the next slide, Simon, please? And this is really important. Now, what would be great is to get your children and young people to design these posters to go home, to understand how important exercise is. Because healthy body, healthy mind, it's really old, but actually it stands the test of time. It is true. If you look after that body and you are active, then the mind is active as well, which is what we want everyone to achieve. But most of all, what we need is it to be safe. But we need you to take risks as well. As long as you take your risks, you're never going to get into trouble. So we need suitable challenges and appropriate risks for our young people. And if you just go to the next slide, the answers are all in there in safe practice. If you're a member or your partnership's a member, you get 24/7 advice. There's no need to worry. There are lots of risk assessments. What we don't want to do is create additional work for you, which we know has happened. But there are lots of things you can do to make sure you're safe. And then if you've got any questions, just ask us and email me. And on the last slide, don't worry about, are all the people you can email us. You know, you can go through and ask the questions and you will always get a response, or you can go through Michelle, or you can go through your other colleagues. But it's really important, if you do nothing else, that you put PE front and centre. And if you convince one person in your school, you will have done a phenomenal job, because what you must remember is just how good you are. We don't want any more of you leaving the profession. We just can't afford to sustain that, because it's going to take, whichever way you look at it, 3 to 4 years to rebuild those numbers up if we have a massive exodus. So on behalf of AFPI, I just want to say thank you for everything you do. Believe in yourself. Don't let anybody push you around. You'll have me to answer to, because you're doing a really good job. And if you have any questions, please come back to me in the next few minutes while you just probably have a toilet or a cup of tea break. Thank you for listening, and Michelle, thank you for inviting AFPI.
thank you, Sue. That was brilliant, and thank you for sharing some of your personal experiences there of the importance of PE in school sport. I think it brings it home when you have got a personal experience to share, as well as you say, cradle to grave, and how important that physical literacy is. So a great big thank you from everyone. Do we have any questions for Sue, please?
Michelle, do they want a quick toilet break and a cup of tea and then think about the questions?
Yeah. So the time now is 9:57. So if we can have a 5-minute break, so just come back just after sort of like around 10:05, and we'll rejoin and do some questions there. Okay. Thank you.
Michelle?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have any, sorry. Did you have any questions come in before for me?
No, I've just checked that and they haven't sent any in, so I'm hoping that they'll have some now.
Okay, I'm just checking my DFE. I've not had anything in yet about whether or not they're going to sort of have a look at the premium. Okay, we are doing a webinar next week. So we're hoping to heard. We're doing a joint webinar with YST next week. So you can share that. Simon will give you the details. No, that hasn't gone viral yet, but because we think it will sell out quite good. Well, not sell out because it's free, but you know, it'll book up quite quickly.
So when, excuse me, when is that likely to be released?
Simon, are you on there, Flower? Do you know when you're going to advertise that? It'll be later in the week, won't it?
It'll be later in the week. Well, as soon as DFE give us the go ahead, we can advertise it then. But until then, we don't know precisely when that will be.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it won't take long because, like the Ofsted one, sold out. Well, not sold out, booked up within 12 hours, 1,000 places.
Yeah.
If you remember, it will be. You can access it later on. So,
yeah.
Sorry, I had to get a drink there. I'd got a frog in my throat, so there was
That's
a bit of selfish thing there. But yeah. So
is the webinar Monday, the 24th of May?
Yeah, we think so.
And time?
It'll be 4-ish.
4-ish. Okay.
We've had to postpone it twice, so
yeah,
it might not happen because we don't know what's going on. It's quite you know, obviously quite busy. We're also trying to launch our task force recommendations and the name of our new chair. So you know, that's great. Is that Joe Collin there? I can see.
Sue, how are you?
Yeah. Oh, I love the hair. It's really grown.
Ridiculously long. It's called lockdown hair and so much swimming.
Oh.
Yeah,
And
it's
how's your
crazy.
son?
He's good, thank you. Yeah, he's in high school now, which is particularly scary.
Wow.
Most of the time I get, only
Yeah.
joking, Mum, only joking. It's
Yeah.
like, it's not funny anymore, Leo.
Any chance, are you still thinking about going to New Zealand at some point?
Yes, I was just talking to my mum actually this morning. They got their permanent residency through today, so they're having a little mini celebration, and Sport NZ are doing a restructure. Probably shouldn't be sharing this with the whole of the world of South Devon, but yeah.
Is your mum and dad out there?
Yeah, mum and dad, my sister. My sister's had another baby.
Oh.
Yeah, so my whole family. Everyone feels sorry for me. I don't have any family in this country.
Bless you.
Bless me.
And are you still in Cornwall?
Devon, South Devon. Yeah, just outside. I've moved to West Buckland, just outside Bantham.
Yeah.
Anyone knows that part of the world?
Yeah. And Leo enjoying school now? Yeah.
Yeah, he had a bumpy start. To be fair, it's been an experience that transition, and obviously it's not easy, like you were talking about. Particularly having gone through lockdown, no SATs, not school back in, then secondary school, all in bubbles. You know, like fair play. The school have been amazing. They've done like everything they can, but obviously you can see the kids, particularly those children who are in trauma, the ACEs kids. Yeah, it's really impacted. So yeah, he had a bit of a rough trot to start with, but much better now.
Well, Ada was saying to me that their school stayed open. This is my son, Michelle, and he was saying that the key workers' children were almost oblivious in some ways. And then when the other children came back, kids who are really, really well behaved, they just were kicking off left, right, and centre. And you know, and the head Jo, she was absolutely brilliant. She's just suspended whole timetable, and all they've done for two to 3 weeks is PE, art, craft, drama. Just to get the kids re-socialised, she said, because, you know, I'm just spending my time dragging them out of lessons because they're kicking off. You know, people don't always think about, do they? You know, you just, I know the parents just want to get them back to school, and I understand that. But it's just, it's just so difficult.
Tell you what, Sue, have you ever done a conference where you're presenting to a cat as well as people?
A cat? No.
Yeah, there's a cat on the screen. I didn't know, like, I didn't get the requirements that we were presenting to cats as well as the people. It's quite impressive.
No, I know there was a dog.
I'm sorry, guys, that's fine.
I'm sorry, I didn't bring in, I wasn't inclusive there. I did not bring in how important it is playing with the cat for your social
Yeah,
life.
thank you, Sue.
I did talk about walking because Julie's dog was barking earlier. So yeah. So it's just Eileen sends her love, Jo.
Does she? How is she?
She's really good. She's you know, she sort of came back out of retirement because she was bored. You know, she was knocking up.
She couldn't go to Australia, that's why.
No, didn't go to Oz, didn't go. My son's getting married actually, and he wanted to go to New Zealand for his honeymoon, but he's getting married in July next year, and it's not the best time to go, is it? In July.
Oh, I don't know. It depends. If you go to the top of the North Island, let me know if he wants to, because if he wants free accommodation, my mum and dad have got 2 spare bedrooms, so you can do it on the cheap.
Brilliant. Well, it was sort of, you know, they want to explore. It's the weather. So, you know, he was wondering whether it's better to sort of go Easter time. And I said, I know someone out there. I will ask. Yeah. Did you know Celia? Did you know Celia's working for the New Zealand government?
I heard that she was there and got stuck. Someone's having their hair done. Look as well. Look at that.
Oh wow! Who's that?
So I heard she got stuck over there, but I didn't realise she left DFE now.
Yes, she's left DFE. Great loss. And she's just gone back to work with the government. Victoria, I just love that.
I love that she's doing the conference in the hair salon. That's brilliant. She'll be mortified.
That is multitasking. That is brilliant.
It is.
Brilliant.
Well, I was listening to this is about physical activity. I was listening to the first part of you, Sue, in the gym. I was just finishing off in the gym listening to your bit. So
That's fine. That's fine. Right. Are they back? I don't see any questions.
I'll ask again. Oh. Okay, is everyone back in? Can't tell because the cameras are not on. So, are we all ready to go? Yeah. a few I'm backs. Okay.
Questions for me? I'm off the hook then, Michelle.
Yeah, I will ask again, Sue.
No, don't worry. People have got questions. I mean, the big
Yeah.
thing about the premium, no, we don't know. You know,
Yeah.
we've cancelled, well, postponed 2 webinars. I was doing one with Kate Thornton Bousfield. We've had to postpone because we've not heard anything. So that's a shame. Right.
Yeah.
See you after, Joe.
Take care, lovely to see you. So my love to Eileen, and I miss you guys. Sorry I can't be
you.
doing more with you. You know where I am if you need me.
Okay, so
Take care.
big thank you there to Sue. If you do have any further questions or any thoughts, Sue is staying on the meeting, so she will be around after the next keynote. She did say that there is a webinar, hopefully, that AFPI are delivering on Monday, the 24th of May, next Monday. Details will be released later this week, but it is dependent on getting a DFE announcement about the PE premium. So we are hoping to get some sort of an announcement this week so that webinar can take place. So do look out for that, and we will send information out about that as soon as we receive it. AFPI members, you will get that direct. So now I'd like to welcome Jo Collin. Jo currently works for Active Devon. She's very a busy lady. She has done many roles in her career. She started as a secondary school PE teacher, then went on to be a head of department. She also spent some time in New Zealand as the strategic lead for young people and was involved in New Zealand's physical literacy. On Jo's return to the UK, she joined Sport England as the member of the children and young people team and looking at the new teacher training pilot. She is now working for Active Devon, is the Director of Strategic Relationships, which is a role funded by Sport England, and she works very much with the young people of Devon, promoting a healthy, active Devon. So over to you, Jo. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Nice to meet you all virtually. I can't see any faces, but maybe that's a good thing. I've seen the cat, so that's a positive. I'm assuming, Julie, because I can see that it's your screen, that I'm able to tell you when to click on, if that's okay. So yeah, here to talk about, I was asked to speak about the Uniting the Movement, which is Sport England's new strategy. Michelle's right in saying that I'm I'm based at Active Devon, but I've one of Sport England's extended workforce. So I have 2 bosses, 2 paymasters, 2 jobs really, and my role is around national to local and local to national, but with a particular emphasis on children and young people. So I thought first and foremost, if you haven't seen it, it's a quite nice way to start, is the video that Sport England released when they first launched the Uniting the Movement strategy. So hopefully this will play. I'll let Julie press the button and make it play, and you can hear it all.
Over the last year, sport has taken a hit. Across the land, movement has been restricted, and the challenges we already faced grew bigger. Today, the need to tackle them is more urgent than ever. We believe that when we move, we are stronger, and that sport and physical activity can do so much more. Play a role in society like never before. From pitches to pavements, we'll come together again, uniting to meet the challenges and make a difference. It's time to take it to another level, because movement is essential for our health, for our communities, and for the next generation. Let's give sport and physical activity a bigger role and bigger goals. We'll get more people moving, playing, feeling the effects. More feet walking, more hearts beating, more celebrating. Individual inspiration, community connection, national transformation. When we work together, we can make a meaningful change. That's our strategy. And united, we can make this happen. Because today, we all have a bigger part to play. United, we are the movement. Join in and visit unitingthemovement.org.
Thank you. If you can move on to the next slide, that would be great. I feel like Professor Whitty. Next slide, please. So, as you can see in relation to that, Julie, I don't know whether it's possible to put it onto full screen, because at the moment you can kind of see the two slides, which probably is a little bit distracting because you can kind of see what's coming afterwards. I don't know if that's possible. I'll wait till.
Bear with me.
No worries. Probably have to click that one back to unhide it, because I think that slide's been hidden.
Yeah. Is that better?
That's perfect. Thank you very much indeed. Awesome. So as you can see from the video, there's been a significant change in language in relation to the fact that what we're talking about is movement. And that was a conscious decision in relation to how people are feeling about the connotations maybe to the word exercise, physical activity, sport, not necessarily physical education in that sense, but in its broader sense. And what we found particularly through COVID is that when we've been constrained to being in our own houses and not being able to move, any sort of movement has been a blessing, and people have been searching for that movement. So the word movement is quite a strong word, and it'd be interesting to get people's takes and thoughts on that. But before we do that, it was important to be able to share, and I know if Sue's still with us, she will know, and she's worked with Sport England for an inordinate amount of time, that the values and the way that Sport England have structured themselves and how they work has changed significantly over the years. And particularly the saying our shared values as Sport England, because majority of how we want to be working more is very much collegiately with the values around inclusivity, collaboration, being ambitious and being innovative. And they're words on a page, but hopefully with some of your experiences, you might be able to see over the time that Sport England are really trying to work hard to make sure that they live to those values of those four. Next slide, please. Brilliant, thank you. So what we do and what we're focusing our time and resources on is very much around the advocacy of movement, and movement being that strongest and first word, sport and physical activity. As you can see the difference, we connect as Sport England work very closely with the Association for PE, and just because PE is not mentioned in these words doesn't mean that physical education isn't vital. It's the bedrock for a lot of all of these movements. As Sue said earlier, that learning to move so you can move to learn is vital. If we don't have that, then a lot of the wider stuff that will go will not continue on. So from this side, we're obviously advocating for the much wider, but we do play our role with it alongside the organisations like AFP and the eSport Trust. Secondly, and we will talk about the 5 big issues that have come from, I think it's important to note that this strategy was developed through talking to an awful lot of people. There was a good 8 months, well, it was a year, but with a part of that time was lockdown. It reduced it to about 8 months of talking to a wide variety of stakeholders, a lot of collaboration and workshops and consultation to understand what resonated with people, what were the big priorities and what they felt that Sport England should be doing. And obviously the final one around creating the catalyst. I think before it's always been a sense that Sport England are the ones that have to create the change, and we're very clear that it's not directly our role. We are there to help create that catalyst by influencing, by advocating, by nudging, by providing resources and tools that might be needed, but we're not necessarily the ones that are going to be making the change. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. Great. So in terms of this, joining forces, in terms of the big issues, it's actually the way it's gone, sorry, it's slightly with the way that the presentation, you're using a few words, but apologies for that. So joining forces on the big issues, these are the 5 big issues that have been identified at top level, talking to and consulting with, as I said, a array of people. Obviously, it goes without saying, recover and reinvent. There has been some discussion around the word reinvent, and could we use the word reimagine, but recover from what has been a really incredibly tough 18 months. Nobody would have predicted what we would have had to have gone through as a nation and as a world, and being able to recover or reinvent from that is really vitally important. We've got a huge wealth of sports clubs, and my time over the last year has been spent trying to support as many sports clubs in Devon as we can from not going under, so that we've got that basis for activity and sport that our young people, as well as us as adults and families, can participate in. Again, you would have seen from the last strategy, and it continues, but with a real strength around connecting to health and wellbeing, and listening to Sue earlier, talking very strongly about the wellbeing of you as staff and as your the young people that you work with and for. It's really vitally important that we're able to see that from that sense. Don't know whether somebody's on not on mute. I can hear talking, but there's a problem if everyone can still hear me. From that side, then it comes to the most important one, which is critically important to you, and that is around the positive experience for children and young people. It's absolutely crucial from our perspective of making sure that young people and our children get the best positive experience. And we'll have a look and unpick that a little bit and what we mean by that later on. But from the perspective of the phrase that I always use, if you truly value something, you will give it time, you will give it energy, you will give it love, you'll give it attention. And what we want to do is make sure that we give everybody the opportunity and tools and resources and support to make sure that young people have such a great experience that when they leave school, they value it so much so that they will invest their own time, energy in it throughout their life course. It will be a bedrock into when they have a family, potentially, and it will be a value that we will have that we don't have. And I think I heard Sue talk about it in terms of young people whose own parents had such a negative experience of being active, of moving, that they don't want their own children to suffer what they did. So they're already putting them off. We want to reverse that trend. Critical in this is the environment, and I think the environments that we create has a massive impact on whether the experience is positive, whether we can connect health and well-being, whether we can move forward with the recovery. So thinking about the environments we create and how they can be active is critical. And then finally, connecting those communities. You would have seen in the video, and I'm sure we've all experienced it, what's happened to our local communities when adversity has hit, when we've been restricted, when we haven't been able to go out, when there's been fear, when there's been uncertainty. Communities have come together, and we probably can all share stories of local people that we've got to know far more through this time than we would have done in normal times. So connecting our communities through movement is critically important. Next slide, please. So from a recover and reinvent point of view, I'm not going to read all of those out to you. You can see them on the screen for yourself. But again, you can see around the words of making sure that what we're providing is inclusive, it's enjoyable, it's meeting people's needs, that we're able to ensure that sport and physical activity reflects the communities that they're serving and working with. It's absolutely vital that we're in that position. We at the moment currently have invested over 20 million into tackling inequalities. That's tackling people with long-term health conditions, disability, ethnically diverse communities and low socioeconomic groups. Those groups have and were before COVID struggling to access and get equal access and opportunity to physical activity and movement. And they were even more so during the pandemic. And so the work that we've been doing is to make sure that we get to those people and support them the very best we can in a way that meets their needs and is right for them. So next slide, please. In terms of connecting communities, we're very much wanting to look in terms of resources and investment. We want to invest in people. and the capacity that we have in community organisations. It's been really insightful over the last year, seeing what people are doing, you know, individuals who are, you know, on their own voluntarily basis, or very much making very small amounts to keep themselves afloat, working from their kitchen table, doing the most amazing work for people across Devon, just to keep their well-being and their positivity and their physical activity and their health going. And we want to support as best we can that some of those organisations. And some of that might look like the lobbying work we're doing around changing some of the guidelines to do with the national lottery structures, so that we can try to influence, so that there's less restrictions, so we're able to fund organisations that need it the most, rather than being restricted and having to find other ways and means to getting that money. It's become really clear around looking at the leadership and the capability that we need locally. This is about place-based working. No longer is it about national policy being put into it. It's about looking at places, what is needed, how is it needed, and how best can it be supported. And it's really about understanding and working with the community, and working with them, and them guiding us, not us telling them. So go very much to our values of collaboration. We don't want to be doing two. We want to be doing for and with in the right, most effective way possible. Next slide, please. And this one will be the most important to you. Obviously, as you can see, this does link very clearly to what Sue was saying, and I absolutely endorse that everything that was being said in terms of the resources that and the challenges that AFP have posed, and the things that Sue has got us to consider about influencing that educational setting. So that, you know, we obviously from sport and physical activity with the curriculum, and what for me is the big shining light is play. Play has been missed massively in this country, and putting play, which is that unstructured child self-determined play, is so much more important as a basis for what then the curriculum can build from and link to. I think the challenges that we would pose here is, we spend a lot of time, and obviously Sue's talked about, have you got student voice? Have you got forums? Have you got boards? Have you got young people giving their voice? We absolutely endorse that, but we would also encourage it to understand not their voice on what they want, as in the activities, because that can sometimes be a red herring, but how they want to feel. How do they want to feel when they are experiencing their curriculum PE, when they're experiencing physical activity, when they're experiencing sport? And as Sue talked about, it is a picture, it's a puzzle, and they are all interlinked, but they all have their uniquenesses. Take one away and then we do some damage. But when we put them all together and we think about how those children want to feel, what they want to experience in terms of what we would see them doing, what we would hear them saying, how they would feel themselves. And the feeling part is the bit that sometimes is missing. And asking them what it feels like. So if I pose the question to you, when was the last time you walked into an environment where you felt uncomfortable, where you didn't feel like you belonged, like you felt like you didn't matter, and you didn't know where to put yourself, and you didn't know what to do? If you can remember that time, I would imagine you would find that your heart was racing. You were looking for any exit. You weren't concentrating. You weren't connecting. You felt very vulnerable. You felt very exposed, and you didn't know what to do. From that perspective, thinking about those children who, what I would call, are the silent sufferers sometimes in our PE and sport. They aren't the ones that are going to play up, because they are kids that know that they don't want to get into trouble. That's the bigger driver. They aren't the ones that when they get bored are going to show to you and they'll start being distracting. They're going to do it, but they're going to do it and not enjoy it. And we're embedding that not enjoyment. So are we asking the right questions? Are we making sure that we understand what it feels like for a child when they are in our setting and in our care, doing physical education, sport and physical activity, and whether we ever ask them not what they want to do, but how they want to feel while they're doing it, and can we ensure that we're able to do that? The other one I'll focus on is about the ruthlessness in terms of focusing on safeguarding. Absolutely critical with this. As much as sometimes it can feel really challenging and it can maybe hinder some of the creativity, it is critical that everybody is safe in this environment, and we will ruthlessly be focusing on making sure that is happening. So those are the keys from that in relation to, and I will pose some questions for you to consider later. But what we're wanting to look at is, how do we make sure that we have the most enjoyable and inclusive experience, and do we really know what that looks like for each year group, each place-based setting, each experience. So what does that look like from the moment the child comes into your setting and into your school, and what are they experiencing as they go through? How do you know? And how can you then respond to it to make sure that they feel engaged, so that they truly value and enjoy movement? Next slide, please. Brilliant, thank you. In terms of health and well-being, again, I'm not going to go through all of them, but from a particular point of view here, it's around the opportunity to influence and look at how we can really connect to the health system. One of the bigger drivers, which links back to the children and young people space, is around social prescribing. A lot of what we're seeing is communities being able to help communities heal. People come to doctors with something that they want a quick fix. We've got used to being given a tablet. It takes a 10-minute consultation, when actually something really key and really important can be what our communities can provide for us. So, for example, I'm very closely linked to the social prescribing work that's going on down here, and we're working actually with a group of adults, but also with a group of young people who've been identified through secondary school to come and do cold water immersion in the sea. We've got the most amazing blue space on our doorstep. The evidence is rife in terms of showing that cold water immersion swimming helps with anxiety, it helps with depression, actually helps for any ladies that might be coming towards close to or suffering with the menopause. It helps with long-term ailments and injuries, arthritis. There are so many things that cold water can do that a tablet doesn't even touch the sides. And what it's bringing is social connectivity. It's bringing us closer to nature, which we know has the greatest impact, and it's giving us a different environment to connect to, which is free of charge. So that is just one example of what we're doing. And if you bring it to the young people, we have a secondary school here that's identified a group of young people who have been suffering from anxiety and mental health concerns through lockdown, and they having the opportunity to go and swim in cold water. Now, for some of you, you might think that's the last thing I want to do, and why would earth would I want to send anyone into cold water? But believe me, the benefits and what we see from both those adults and young people has been amazing, and it's running rife across North Devon as well, that kind of activity. Next slide, please. As I said, in terms of active environments, if only I'm sure, Sue, you could do that handstand, no problem still now, but I think I was probably about 5 the last time I could do that. But from our percentage of active environments, for us, it's really about looking at how we ensure that we create and maximise what we have in our place. So locally here, to where I am, I've been working with Plymouth City Council, and what we've been looking at is what we call the green, the blue and the built space. So how do we make sure that the environments are as active as possible? So if we look at school settings, how are we able to enable people to be more active as they move around our school settings? How are we able to make the environments more appealing to be active when it's break times and lunch times? Is it that you've got resources and a wealth of them, but they tend to be stuck in a cupboard because of the environment that is not allowing it to be out for kids to be able to just play? Is it that we are restricting where people walk around the school because of timeframes? Is there a way that we can utilise and get people to be moving quicker, but going further in terms of getting from one class to another? And I think it might have been one of the teachers in this setting that I spoke to a couple of years ago, who used to, when he would time himself to see if he could each time get from one classroom to the other a bit quicker, to get more steps in, to get a bit of his heart rate lift while he's moving from the environment. For us, we know that creating the right environment, an environment that feels good. So, for example, we're doing a lot of work with a design phase around developing more access for girls, particularly. So we've got a lot of older sports clubs who've got porta cabins or got old sort of village type halls, and the environment, which has been over the years been designed mostly because it was either for a male dominated sport that's now become female, just doesn't have the environment that creates that appeal for girls. And how do we make sure that we've got all of those facilities that give the right inclusivity so that people can? It's vitally important, and some of you will know in terms of schools who share a leisure facility, the leisure industry is teetering on the brink at the moment. Leisure operators who are there are a small in number and are not stable through this environment at the moment. So the Leisure Recovery Fund is vital. Those of you who've got access to leisure centres, be kind, be patient, be tolerant with those people because they are on a knife edge, but also value what you've got, because once they're gone, it's going to be very unlikely we'll get them back, and that's a real concern for us at the moment. Next slide, please. So from my perspective, and these are some questions, and this is the last slide from me, and I would like the opportunity to, if possible, pose those questions, have some reflection, and come back and maybe be able to talk about it. But do you know is the why? Why do you think your children, young people value movement if they do? What is it they value about movement? Do we understand their why? How much do your children feel valued and positive when participating in PE, sport and school physical activity? Do you know, have you asked that? How much do they feel valued? Do we understand what that value is to them? What stops your children, young people from being able to move during the school day? What barriers are there that are going to prevent them? And then, as Sue has alluded to, your own well-being as staff is critically important. So why do you and your staff value movement during the school time? What benefits does it bring to you? When is it easiest for you and your staff to be able to move during the school day? And what stops you being able to move during that day as well? Those are some fundamental questions that we are posing in order to help us, not just as Sport England, but also Active Devon, understand how we can support you better. So I'm going to pause there and give you some reflection time. And if anybody's feeling like they've got a viewpoint on any of those questions or have got any comments or questions, then feel free to sort of put your hand up or unmute yourself, etc. Michelle, I don't know how you want to manage this. And obviously I haven't gone till the full time, but I wanted to give some time to consider these questions, if that's possible.
No, that's fine. As you've said, Joe, if people want to unmute and just have it, if don't want to type anything in the chat box, that's fine. Just unmute, put the hand up. There's a little face there with a hand. So if there's something that you want to say. But I think there's some really important questions there. And as I've been working with schools over the last few months, as we've returned on the 8th of March, having full classes back, I think I have had to challenge schools, particularly in playgrounds where there's maybe tape across, keeping children apart, and making sure that obviously in the COVID environment that you guys are working in, that the children are safe, but also that they are free to play, particularly at break times and lunch times. And I think for some schools that has been a challenge. I don't know whether any of others have found that sometimes that the COVID restrictions in place in playgrounds are quite difficult.
Sarah's asked in relation to, will we have this slide so that I can share with my team? The team, Michelle and the team have got the slide, Sarah, so yes, absolutely, more than happy. We'd love you to share it, and any feedback that you have would be gratefully received. They're very quiet, Michelle, this group.
Yeah. Come on, guys. What challenges are you facing in answering some of these questions, particularly in the, there we go, Becca.
Can you give us an example of what's been tricky, Becca? What's the barriers that you've had?
Hi, can you hear me now?
I can,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, so I think what we found really tricky on site particularly was that we were having to zone areas off. So I teach in reception. So reception for the first part of lockdown were restricted just to our outside areas. So we didn't have access to the playground at all for the first term. So the children, because they have kind of outside learning areas, we were restricted just to those outside learning areas. So the children had access outside, but those learning areas aren't areas where the children can have a good stretch and a good run around, because they're not big enough. So, we had to kind of really persuade to get our playground areas back, and the playgrounds that were just all zoned, in order to protect the children. which was necessary and are still zoned currently. So the children have just had very small areas to work within. But you know, it's getting better now, and of course, because of the better weather, she says, as it's raining currently, but because of the better weather, we've now got access to the school field, which means that children are able that, you know, they're just getting more and more space to be able to do more and more, spread out a little bit more. But it's just been really tricky that, you know, the play areas that they've had have just been really restricted. So we've just had to manage the equipment and give teachers lots of ideas of what they can do in those smaller spaces.
Brilliant. And that's critical, Becca, in the relation to giving those ideas. It is, I know, I'm conscious it takes a bit more time and preparation, but having someone like yourself to stimulate those ideas and to consider the resources is crucial. And actually, that's where the reinvent or the innovation might come from, because if you hadn't have had the shorter space to think and you had to think outside the box, we'll keep doing the things we know work and we never get exposed to. So potentially there could be some genius that comes out of it, but also acknowledging that it's your hard work and extra time being put in to help other teachers to think like that. And I think that's the bit for us that we know. And Sue, if I missed it, apologies, but I know from the work when Michelle introduced me, when I came back from New Zealand and worked on the teacher training work, when we surveyed a group of inactive adults, a fifth of them said that they had a negative experience from their secondary PE experience. And actually, when we dug a bit deeper with it, quite a lot of those inactive were primary school, gone on to be primary school teachers. So they're taking into their teaching a negative experience. So it's not something they're naturally going to want to come up with and think about, because they probably had a really bad experience themselves and they don't see the value in it, which is why we want to put the word value. How much value do you, as a school, as an environment, as a setting, as an individual, and as your children put on it? Because when you do, you put time and effort in to think outside the box. So I'm sure your school are very, very grateful to have you, Becca, for putting the time and effort in because you value it.
Well, I think also that the teachers themselves, we've had, you know, thanks to all of you guys, you know, we've had so much information through about what we can be doing, you know, from Ian and Becky. And so we've had termly focuses as well, which has been put into the PE lessons and also put into play times. So that's helped to keep teachers focused and given them lots and lots of resources. So that's really helped us, you know. So we've done a stamina focus, we've done a skipping focus, we've used all the videos that you guys have put online. Those have all gone home as well. So I think we've had a lot to use. So that's helped with the smaller spaces as well, and helped with, I know someone's just put it on there, with having to share limited resources with classes to stop, you know, resources being used across different classes. So I think it is just using what's been available, which of course we've had lots available to us, to try and do as much as we can within the limited space that we've had. Brilliant,
thank you. That's like some great examples, and other people will obviously, you know, from the group will be able to hear that and hopefully connect with you on anything they might be struggling with. Apologies to, I've got Elle back, so I don't know your first name. I don't know whether you're male or female, but I've just clicked it to say thank you for sharing that, in terms of, you know, what's been a challenge and the youngsters and your play leaders, and it's been really tricky, but I'm really pleased to hear that it's starting to go back to normal. And that is the challenge with some of this, isn't it, that we can all offer solutions to stuff, but ultimately at the height of it, it was around people keep being safe, our health and well-being, you know, was about being safe. It's Louise. Thank you, Louise. So, you know, from that side, you know, the health and well-being of your staff and your children is vitally important. So understand that's a tricky one, but I'm glad that it's starting to ease now. Chelsea, this is really great. Thank you for this. So from your perspective, afternoon lessons is when we can move best, and we've been able to link this to our curriculum, which is fantastic. Value movement because it burns off excess energy. I value it as I'm challenging children, so by getting involved in their movement I can model and de-stress as well. That's brilliant, and that for me is absolutely a real shining example. And I watched it yesterday. I went into a school yesterday to observe a lesson, and watching they had two trainee teachers, and the trainee teachers modelling and moving with the kids and demonstrating. you could see those children who probably knew they were least engaged and weren't particularly motivated, could see that they could be with the teacher, and there was some reassurance and confidence in that. Watching the feedback that as teachers you give on an individual basis rather than collective, as a class was raising kids. They were growing a foot taller when the teacher was identifying some really good things that they were doing. And then obviously, catch-up lessons, presenters being able to move more. I think it's a challenge, and I know that I like the fact that Sue said the C word. I did wonder where you were going with it, Sue, so it was brilliant when you said about catch-up. You know, is there a way, and challenge back and see, you might have something to say about this, but is there a way that through these catch-up lessons, we can actually put movement into the lessons? You know, if it's around math stuff, could we do more on that movement from that side to get them to do it in a more practical basis from that side? I can see I've got a hand up. I can only see an S.
It's mine, Joe.
Oh, brilliant. Go, Steve.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But all the researchers we've been working with, and you know, Andy Daly's on our task force, and what he was saying is what I'd said earlier in my bit. It has to be relevant. You just can't stand up and do a jiggle. So your activity needs to be planned around the curriculum subject you're doing. And linked, because then if they're a kinesthetic learner, they're going to learn what you're doing anyway, as well as being active. So there's some great stuff out there, isn't there? You know, the active maths and all that sort of stuff. There's some great stuff, but it's not just about standing up and jumping. Although that can help, it needs to be tied into the learning, because what the research is saying, that the kids are running around the school but actually losing more learning time, but tick the activity box. So somehow it has to be meshed together to make a difference. So, you know, as I say, relevant. If you're doing sort of map work or looking at buildings or the geography or maths or looking at calculations in maths, you can actually do that and then do some orienteering in the lesson. So they're actually walking around the school and outside and what have you. And hopefully, as somebody said, if the weather's better, get as much activity out there, but related to the subject itself, or it doesn't mean anything. And what they did find with some children, they then became so hyped up they couldn't concentrate in the lesson. I don't know if any of you have young children, you've taken them to the ballpark, then you put them in the back of the car and ask them to shut up and be quiet, and they're just wild because they're so hyped up. So it's making sure the activity is relevant, will not interrupt learning, but will actually reinforce and get them active whilst learning. So there's lots of bits to throw in, but you know, you guys are so creative, you'll come up with all sorts of stuff. Joe, you know, the active partnership, creating the active schools framework. I don't know if you can share that. I mean, that we've just put that at the heart of our task force stuff, because it's making such an impact in those active partnerships. So
I haven't got it on here, but I can send it to the guys. So we have, thank you, Sue. We've got shaped an active schools framework. It's come from the work that AFP's done with, is North Yorkshire, wasn't it, Sue? Or Yorkshire Sport Foundation, I think.
Yeah, Yorkshire Sport started it.
Yeah, so they kick-started it, and we've taken it. So if you are looking particularly with some support around wanting to make your school a more active school and using the active school framework, you can go on to Active Devon's website under the schools section, children and young people, and there's a whole framework there with tools, resources and ideas that can help you. But also, if you want some extra support, we have a team of people ready. We've already got some 3 or 4 schools that have wanted us to come in and give bespoke support to help them identify where the gaps are and work on that. And that was part of what I was doing yesterday. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Creating Active Schools, Yorkshire Sport, and you can see ours on our Active Devon website as well. Probably should have put that, but I was thinking more Sport England today, which is a bit of an error. Dan, it's a really, really great term, and I can see that Jason's given you an example, but you're absolutely right. The term community has been widely used, and we all collectively do need to, and I think the more opportunities that we can do, again, on Active Devon's website, we have an activity finder, and the more we can know about clubs and activities in local areas, we're able to signpost, and that might be a start if you're unsure about anything that's happening in your area. But again, I think the more that we can be making those links and relevant links, absolutely is critical.
Joe, can I just add to that? Because for my sins, I'm involved with Tavistock Football Club, and when schools went back after Easter, we found that we had no under 6s, no under 7s, no under 8s, no under 9s and no under 10s. And that's a really successful football club that had no teams because of the COVID pandemic. So what we did is we did a shout out to all the local primary schools in the area to say, you know, we are recruiting. We've got none of these children in these age groups. And we had about 60 children turn up to our mini soccer centre every Friday. So now we've got all these children who want to play football, but we've now got to find coaches to run those teams. But I think what's been really great about that example is the schools have really pulled together and promoted it for us. So I think if local clubs are struggling and they don't have their teams, then schools do have a role really to try and promote and make parents aware that, you know, these community teams have been decimated, and if football are struggling, then other schools definitely will be.
Totally.
So yeah.
And to add to that, Michelle, if you've got a club that is struggling and you're connected personally or through the school, and the club is struggling, not related to players but related to financial, to get PPE equipment, or they've got to pay extra for the hall because the hall charges are higher because of a COVID insurance and PPE and cleaning, they can go to Sport England's Return to Play funding. So that's an opportunity in terms of, and it will pay for a small amount of, like, if you've got more, you know, you need more volunteers or more coaches and they need training up, it will pay for the training. They'll pay for a minimal for a short period of time to pay for staff if needed, but it will only be for a short period because it's obviously got to be sustainable. And then Active Devon, we have a pot of money for anyone who is particularly from a community group, can have links to the school, but it can't directly come from the school. Community groups that have been hit by COVID that are supporting children, young children with disabilities, with long-term health conditions, who are from an ethnically diverse community or from an LSEG community. So we've done things like we've invested in some people who would have been supported outside of COVID, who are morbidly obese and struggle to get out of their house. They would have been helped to do physical activity or taken somewhere and they couldn't through COVID. So we've paid for VR headsets. So they've been able to do exercise, and in fact 3 of those 10 people that had VR headsets over the course of lockdown have got to a position where they are fit enough and well enough to walk out of their own house, which they haven't done for the last 2 years. So some of those exciting things, it's not around children, young people specifically, but you can get the sense of what we're trying to do, a little bit of innovative. Again, a lot of cold water immersion for depression and anxiety as well. So again, if you've got any links to anywhere and they're struggling with COVID issues, we funded, I think it's the Tarka Otters basketball club, and we are funding the disability rugby club to get back up and running because they're struggling from that side. So those are just a couple of examples.
Brilliant.
Got any positive stories about links with parents and the school community rather than outside links? I personally don't, but I don't know whether anyone else has got anything from there.
So Jason's on there.
I've got a grant to get parents to get their coaching. Yep. Brilliant. That's a good solution. So anyone else got anything regarding parents and school community? I think the only thing I would say from that, I don't have a direct experience, but when I was working in secondary school, the more that we can engage the parents to come in and see and do stuff and show stuff within the PE department, you know, sort of not just the traditional come and watch the football team play or the rugby team, but sort of have an open house for parents to come and see what their children are doing, a bit like you would, you know, come and look at the art displays. It's come and see all of the array, just not just for open evenings, but outside, tends to engage some of those parents to see what you're trying to do, and that's your ability to connect with them. That's brilliant, Chelsea, like that. I love that. Open all-day sports day and a family picnic. That sounds cool. Should have sent my son there. That would have been nice. So is there anything else? Are there any generic questions that you have regarding the Sport England strategy, which is a 10-year strategy? They have just launched, or about to this week, I think, is the 1-year implementation plan, to give more details on the bone. But what I've just shared is for the next 10 years. So that's the first time they've done it. Would really welcome anyone's thoughts on the word movement and what that generates, whether you like it or you don't. Is it a bit Marmite? What's your views on anything you've heard, and do you have any questions? Take that as no, I think, Michelle.
Yeah.
All good.
So was that return to play. I like terming of movement.
Like the terming of movement. Okay, that's good.
Julie's just shared the document there. Return to play.
Thank you. So helpful. Thanks, Julie. Yeah, that's what we've been hearing. Cool. Helpful. Well, hopefully with the slides coming through to you, you've got the video, but it is on Sport England's website if you need to get access to it, if you want to use it. Totally get the sense from some people that are coming through around the value, and that maybe your senior leadership teams are struggling with value. Obviously your partnership are here to help you, but at any point Active Devon can help in having any of those strategic conversations. We've done a few for schools to sit in, go and have a conversation with head teachers. If that helps you in any way, we can absolutely do that, so that they can articulate and see the difference. And I think Sue had alluded to it, I haven't put it on here, but we all know the benefits. It's just articulating and showing and being able to put it in a language that a head teacher is going to resonate with. So their bigger priorities are going to be around funding, Ofsted inspections, league tables, attainment, attendance, behaviour, and we can align attendance, attainment and behaviour to physical activity, PE and sport contributing. Movement has a massive contribution factor. It's just demonstrating to it. So the one example I give you, and I'll let Sue jump in on more specific, but we worked with a school whose children, after coming back from COVID, their stamina to be able to concentrate because of obviously being at home and difference, and their resilience to change was really, really challenging. The school, they'd seen a real regression in that. So we worked with them using some support around PE, but also some support around the physical activity that they were planning to do, that really focused on resilience and stamina, really focused on in improving those for those particular children. So we were quite targeted to show the head the difference. The heads can really see it, and now they're embedding that across the whole school in terms of everybody. So sometimes you need to be quite targeted and specific and ask if you can do a bit of a test and learn piece, so that the head can see, or the senior leadership team or a deputy head, whoever it might be working with, can see, rather than trying to blanket coverage change to start with, because that's harder for them. That's a bigger risk for them than maybe working with 5 or 6 children or a class, etc. What we've also seen is, it's a school that's really lucky. They have managed to get they've got space and investment, but they put a bike track, and it's been rotated, and they've now seen active travel go massively. So a year group, when they're rotated 2 days a week to use the pump track, they have 20 of the class cycling to school. When they haven't got the pump track, 5 of them cycle to school. So we can see the behaviour change in it. So is there an opportunity of things that you might be thinking about that's going to, demonstrate in, just by rotoring, it demonstrates to the head teacher the difference of what's happening and the motivation through that. So you'll have loads more than me, so
No, it's just the baselining I referred to, Joe. Obviously people are testing for literacy and numeracy and, looking at the gaps that have happened, but actually those fine and gross motor skills, they can't sit and hold the pen, they can't hold the core, because they've not been doing those types of activities. And schools who've screened that now and used it have actually just put half an hour a day, so they can come in a bit earlier, just to do like a wake up and shake up, to get more physically active, and then to do things about coordination. So a lot of the playground stuff there's a lot of playground games about building coordination, so children can hold the pen, sit up, concentrate, and then they can actually work on their maths and English or whatever they're focusing on. But yeah, we've seen some fantastic stuff, and Manchester Met University did some research for MSP
which showed all the things and what they needed to do. And then Active Black Country have also used a lot of community stuff. They've introduced skipping, because particularly cultural communities, there's some real issues with children actually regressing in terms of their fine and motor skills because they haven't done anything other than be on screen. And they couldn't hold a pen, they'd got cramp, they were out of breath easily, encouraging them to walk to school because they were absolutely shattered. So it's a big issue. I mean, one of the things I didn't mention as well is encouraging of the swimming. We've had the stats now, 150,000 year sixes left school in 2019, unable to swim, safe self-rescue. We've had 2 drownings in Birmingham, more canals than Venice, 2 in Yorkshire. So it's really important as well that we get children physically active through swimming, get them back in the pools as fast as possible.
Really important message there, Sue, particularly living where we do as well.
Well, it's a safe self-rescue as well, Michelle. That's important because they've lost those core skills, and we can do safe self-rescue in school. Now, we don't want that message going right across permanently, because we know, as everyone does, that you can practice a skill, but until it's put into a context, you don't know actually if you're really any good at it. So you can certainly do some of the safe rescue in the hall or in the classroom, and then take them to the pool to practice that. Steve Parry has invested £1 million from his own business, him and Becky Adlington, to try and offer more swimming opportunities. But we know some local authorities have been quite difficult. And I think it's important to bring that pressure to bear via Sport England and Swim England to say, can you help us? Because they're pushing up prices or what have you, and I'm trying to get an answer. Can we actually use some of the underspend for the premium to spend on pop-up pools? Because that would be great. Cuts down the travel, use the swimming while they're waiting, reading the books. I've seen it work so well. I visited one in London. It was amazing. And also it opens up the market to the community, to parents as well, which drives down the cost at the leisure centre. That's a permanent experience we've got. Yeah. So super. Lovely, Jo. Lovely to see you and hear the messages.
Yeah.
As ever, aligned. We should probably connect next time. But
yeah, well, hopefully the next time we can have a face-to-face conference. So we'll, fingers crossed. Jo, is that the end of your presentation? You
that's the end. I didn't want to hound too much. No. I know you had lots of time, but it's very top line, and it's really whether anyone wanted to know any more in relation to those questions. The implications really is around positive experiences, and I think Sue's alluded to it from the content specific and what they know, and those practical. From ours, it's around really challenging around what the value of it, which we know, but do we understand what the value is to our children, and do we understand what it really feels like? I'm really passionate about, I call it, it's like the silent killer. It's those kids that smile their way through PE and they're hating every single minute of it, but we would never know from the outside because they're just doing it, but they're hating it. And do we really know that? Because that's a generation we're putting off that we don't even realise, because they don't want to get into trouble. They don't want to, they aren't disruptive kids. They don't have a fear of not doing that. They want to comply, but they're complying through gritted teeth. And I'm very passionate about it because that was my sister. That's what she experienced. And actually she would have been and done an amazing job in terms of coaching and leadership, because she understood what was being asked of her. And I saw this yesterday with a young lad who's got a disability, that his body's just not going to be allow him to excel any further, but he understands, he really understands. So it was challenging the teacher about seeing that success in that child helping others, because he can coach, the coaching part of it. So can we see and embrace, but can we really acknowledge, if we were deep down in our souls understand the days, Sue and I all know many times we've walked into meetings where we feel really uncomfortable as adults. We don't know where we're supposed to go. We're not sure. We don't feel it's right. We don't feel like we belong. We're really anxious. Now you do that as a 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old child. And, my son, bless him, he's at secondary school, and unfortunately he has 2 sporty parents and he's not the world's sportiest. He talks about, and as a secondary PE teacher, it does break my heart, he talks about wanting to go to tennis club after school, but he won't go because all the kids that are there are good. And he knows he's not as good as them. And it's not being embraced enough to be able to see the difference of it. And we put it on as a collective, and we're providing this opportunity, and that's brilliant. But how do we make sure that we're inclusively wanting to attract someone like my son who does want to play tennis, but all he can see is the really good kids going, and he's just intimidated, and so therefore he won't go, and I can't seem to push him, and I'm ending up paying for him to go to tennis at a club where there's 2 or 3 people when he could be going to the after school tennis, but he won't go to that. So for me, it's, can we ask those questions and understand it?
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time, both of you, this morning. Has anyone got any further questions for Sue or Joe before we close the conference this morning?
Can I just comment on Sue's got some gorgeous nails as ever. I thought I might trump you, but you've nailed it again with pink.
Joe, you should have seen them. I was like sort of something out of Harry Potter. I did. I was awful, what with the hair and the nails, and I just looked awful. But yeah, done now. That was my treat for not going out. So day at the spa.
Excellent, done you.
Brilliant. And to the lady who was having their hair done that flashed up earlier, well done. That's all about health and well-being, being in the conference and having your hair done at the same time. Well done.
Demonstrating, because she's a kinesthetic learner, she can multitask.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if you just look in the chat box there, Julie has put the feedback link. Please ensure you do feedback to us, and we've got a lot of pre-recorded workshops there for you to now take a look at this afternoon. Got about our packages for next year, the PE subject leaders and AFP level 4, National Curriculum Outdoors, putting PE at the heart of the curriculum, recovery. So a lot there for you to have a look at. And school games framework, easy steps at Interhouse, Active 30, volleyball, active travel, river bear yoga, so lots. And they will remain on our YouTube channel for the next, don't feel you have to do all of them this afternoon. Then we're not going to take them down. So a big thank you to Joe and Sue for sharing their experiences and knowledge and all the national programs that are out there that they work hard on your behalf, and hopefully we'll get some news about the PE premium in the next week or so. Take care, everyone. Remember your own well-being, and remember that for your children as well. The emotional well-being is really important, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much all.
Bye.
Michelle, should we stay on at the end?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
So a few people there.
Yeah, do you want us all to?
Yeah, that would be useful if you're available now for a few minutes.
Yeah, no worries.
Just want to
Put
see
the video on now.
here. So Julie's still here. Here.
If you click on together